Total red
completely.
herring.
And by the way, I don't support. I don't
go
support
to-
gun
Is the
after
guy
the
who
argument.
smokes and spends all day arguing with strippers and OnlyFans girls going to speak up? I don't know.
They
who
make
this
better
guy
arguments
is.
than you do,
General
bro.
Ben Hodges,
It's not my fault
thank
that
you
you
so
have a
much
low
for your
IQ,
service to
lower
this
IQ
country.
than a stripper
You're
and an
a hero.
OnlyFans
You're an
girl.
In this video, Andrew Wilson faces off against two neocon warhawks on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Andrew Wilson and these two geniuses debate the United States' role in Ukraine. With that, let's watch Andrew Wilson, as one would expect, make fools of two neocons that love them some war.
Of money that are loaded onto a C-17 and then delivered into Ukraine. It's money that is spent replacing or buying ammunition, refurbishing old equipment that is then loaned or given to Ukraine. And of course, there are no U.S. troops in Ukraine except for those officers that are assigned to the embassy and the Office of Defense Cooperation, whose task is to make sure accountability of every javelin, every artillery round, every set of binoculars. Oh, you can shake your head if you want to. That's a fact. So
why don't you stop pretending that we don't have United States Special Forces on the ground right this second? We don't have CIA agents all over Ukraine right this second. Why don't you just stop pretending? Because it's nonsense.
Okay.
And we all know it's nonsense. This is the way, hang on. This is the way it's been going for a long time. And when you talk about, well, Andrew, what we're actually doing is we're spending a whole bunch of money on refurbishing equipment here instead of buying new equipment to send over there. So what? So why are you still spending tons of my money on something I don't care about to send over to a nation which is corrupt as hell? So can we just stop BSing each other for a second? Yes, the United States has boots on the ground there. Yes, we have special forces units there. We have CIA agents there, and we would be fools to pretend we don't.
It's an interesting argumentative style that you had, and you know, I always, when people start calling me names or whatever, then I really the credibility.
I didn't call you any
argument,
names, sir.
It's
I didn't call you any names.
Whatever. Okay.
What was the name that I called you?
I think the key is this idea of trying to
Perhaps you're
end
just
the
offended
war.
by tone. You just don't like tone. You know, maybe a little tone policing getting worked in there. Maybe that Southern drawl where you try to make yourself sound likable because you have it doesn't work so well on me because you can't gaslight me with this stuff. It's nonsense. Yes, there's boots on the ground there. Yes, there've been boots on the ground there probably since the beginning. Yes, we're spending $100 billion plus on equipment that we then either send over there. And by the way, there's hidden money going over there too. This is such nonsense. Just stop gaslighting the American people. Stop it. We're not stupid. We've seen this on repeat so many times now. So many times.
General,
So-
respond.
The idea of ending the war, of course, is exactly what we would like to do, but it needs to be an end that is sustainable. And I think President Zelensky understands that he can't just sign or accept an end to the war where Russia.
Well, this is a particularly sensitive neocon, isn't it? Now, I've heard Andrew Wilson debate many times. I've heard him call people names many times, but I certainly didn't hear it there. Did you guys? You know, it's been a while since I've heard one of these guys try to justify all the money and weapons that we send to Ukraine. But I don't think I've ever heard him suggest that there's only a handful of officers over there diligently working to make sure every single penny is spent appropriately. Anybody who tells you that all the money that's going over there is being spent judiciously is insane. I think one of the reasons Zelensky doesn't want this to end is because it's just been endless money into his pocket and people like him in their government. We know it's a corrupt as hell government. I'm not looking at the polling, but I believe the vast majority of the American people want the killing to stop there and they want the war to end. And frankly, call me cold-hearted, I don't care which country it benefits. Ukraine, Russia, both, neither. Ideally, it would benefit the United States, Ukraine, and Russia. Everyone would be happy, and I hope that can happen, but I don't know if you're going to get a win-win-win resolution like that. But one way to stop the killing is for the United States to stop funding this garbage. Anyway, let's see how else they try to defend this.
Russia will wait for us to lose interest because we always do lose interest, and then they pick right back up with a resumption of the conflict after we have left or turned our back. And so I think it's reasonable to expect the Ukrainians to want some sort of guarantee, whether that's continued aid, continued equipment, or presence. They haven't I don't know exactly what that looks like. Obviously, I would prefer to see Ukraine in NATO. We get better the day they join NATO. It's not going to happen anytime soon, especially if the United States is not willing to do it, and the Biden administration also is not willing to do it. But how do we end it when you're the partner on the other side, negotiating partner on the other side of the table is Vladimir Putin? I mean, there's no reason to have confidence that they will live up to any agreement because there's nothing in their history. And I do appreciate that Andrew likes my North Florida accent.
Well,
let me bring in Dave. I want to bring in Dave. I want to bring in Dave. We've got.
Yeah, I never quite understand this argument that seems to just logically fall apart, that we can't end a war because the war might pick up at some point in the future, and therefore, if we don't have a perfect guarantee that, I mean, what, even if it, I mean, I don't know. I've heard the entire time through this war, including on your show, Piers, that if Putin was successful in Ukraine, then he was going to move on Poland, right? Like, this is what Joe Biden kept saying. This was the official, like, you know, fear mongering of this war. And so if you're telling me that even NATO membership isn't a guarantee, then yes, we never have a perfect guarantee. By the way, you also don't have a guarantee from any government in the history of the world. That doesn't mean that ending a war isn't still a positive. And I just want to go back to what was, you know, brought up initially. You know, the idea that this was a case of failed deterrence, and that if only we had deterred Vladimir Putin sooner, then we could have avoided this whole thing. I mean, let's just kind of quickly overlook the last 20 years of U.S. foreign policy in Europe. We've expanded NATO all the way to Vladimir Putin's borders. We constantly floated out the idea for years that we would include Ukraine at some point, give them full membership. We said point blank in 2008 at the Bucharest summit.
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
That we were bringing Georgia and Ukraine into NATO before Russia ended up going to war with Georgia there. And then we I mean, look, Piers, like we've done this before on the show too, right? But just imagine, if you can, have a little bit of strategic empathy and put yourself in the Russian shoes. If Russia, let's say the Soviet Union had never collapsed, and the Soviet Union had poured $100 million into a Mexican street protest that overthrew a democratically elected government, and they had been saying for years they were going to bring Mexico into their military alliance, and then when the new government came up, they recognized them immediately and started arming them, as Donald Trump foolishly bragged about the other day with Zelensky in the Oval Office. Piers, do you think Americans would feel that was deterrence, or do you think we might view that as a provocation? I mean, like, it's just,
Stop
by
using
the way,
logic,
when
Dave.
Donald
Stop
Trump,
using logic, Dave.
Well, look, when
Well, let me ask.
Donald
Well, rather
Trump
than
was-
me try and
very quickly,
answer a very logical question, let me get Jake to respond to that.
So the first thing that he said, what is the concern if Russia takes Ukraine? If Russia can't even go 60 kilometers deep and take the city of Pokrovsk, what is the threat to NATO? And it's, yes, absorbing a country of 40 million people, absorbing a country that has $10 trillion of natural resources under the ground. It's the strategic location on the Black Sea. If Russia
I didn't realize that Ukraine was sitting on $10 trillion of resources. Really, I didn't realize it was that much. So problem solved, right? Mine those resources yourself and fund all the wars you want. Go ahead. Just leave us out of it. So if I'm hearing this correctly, this one neocon is arguing that if Zelensky signs something now and ends the war and stops the killing, that there's a possibility that in the future, the U.S. loses interest in the conflict and Russia picks right back up and tries to go after Ukraine again. So because that might happen, we need to keep sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine. That is the crappiest logic I've ever heard in my life. And how about this? How about if that should happen again, there are a lot of other members of NATO. And I know Ukraine's not a member yet, but there are a lot of European countries with a lot of money. Why don't they foot the bill the next war? How about that? How about we make a deal, we go every other war? We'll fund one, then Europe funds one. Is that fair? We're still I think it's still unfair to us, but how about you give us a break for a little while? I don't understand this rhetoric where the side in favor of just continuing this war in perpetuity they never talk about all the lives being lost. Like, ending war is a good thing. How is this even a debate? Maybe this other war hawk will give me all the answers. Let's wrap up the video.
Absorbs Ukraine, they will Russify the people. They will annihilate the Ukrainian identity, turn them into Russians, and then start press ganging them into the military and send them into meat wave attacks against the Baltics, against Poland and the Suwalki Gap. We're trying to prevent Russia from getting stronger. And I don't care about what Russia thinks or feels. Russia is not a great power. Russia has an economy the same size roughly as Spain. Do you think Spain is a great power that the United States should respect?
Exactly, dude. Listen. We are in the business of trying to be a world empire, and we're going broke. We're $36 trillion in debt because we can't afford to do it. We've blown $8 trillion in the last 20 years on foreign wars.
Why is Donald Trump talking about invading Greenland? Why is Donald Trump talking about invading Panama?
I don't agree with that.
Why is Donald Trump talking about annexing Canada? Why is he talking about ethnic cleansing in the Gaza Strip? That is empire.
You lost
MAGA is the one pushing for America to be a global empire.
That's a total red herring. Total red herring. Total red
Completely.
herring.
And by the way, I don't support.
Like, go
Is the
after
guy
the
who
argument.
smokes and spends all day arguing with strippers and OnlyFans girls going to speak up? I don't know.
They
who
make
this
better
guy
arguments
is.
than you do,
General
bro.
Ben Hodges,
It's not my fault
thank
that
you
you
so
have a
much
low
for your
IQ,
service to
lower
this
IQ
country.
than a stripper
You're
and
a
an
hero.
OnlyFans
You're an
girl.
expert. These other guys, I can't take them serious.
Okay, well, I mean, listen, you just couldn't respond to my point.
You need to have the right pedigree in order to make an argument, bro.
Say that you can't take me seriously, but you just completely didn't.
That guy made a mistake. He went after Andrew personally, said all he argues against is strippers and OnlyFans girls. And then Andrew said, yeah, you're more low IQ than any of them. And isn't it amazing? All these war hawks, neocons, neoliberals, they're all the same. They think you can't have an opinion on an argument if you're an average American that doesn't have the education that they deem acceptable. That's crazy. So this dude acknowledged that Russia is not that scary. And then Dave's like, exactly. That's the point. Why are we worried? Then out of nowhere, he tries to say, well, Donald Trump's going to annex Canada or Greenland. First of all, he's not going to annex anyone. But that was the moment you idiots lost the argument because you changed the subject completely after proving your own point incorrect. But we want to hear from you. What do you all think about this conversation about Ukraine and whether we should continue to fund this war, or should we cut off our assistance to Ukraine? Should we do it gradually? What do you think the best plan is? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, as always, really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.